Good morning, everyone. Just going to wait a couple minutes for everyone to sign in and we'll get started. If you're just joining us, we're just waiting for everyone to sign in. We'll get started shortly. Well, hello and welcome. We'd like to thank you for joining us for our 5th installment of the Traxo Office Hours webinars. In our very first installment back in April of this year, we did a visit with 3 travel managers about their anticipation of the months to come as a result of COVID-19. Now that we are more than halfway through the challenge of 2020, we thought it would be a good idea to discuss what has been learned with travel managers whose programs have begun to resume travel, as well as a revisit with one of the panelists we had as a guest in our original webinar back in April for what we have titled simply COVID Response, What We've Learned. For those of you not too familiar with what we do at Traxo, the benefits can be summed up in 3 words: data, visibility, and control. Medium and large enterprises use us to eliminate their corporate travel blind spots, also known as booking leakage, by automatically aggregating all corporate travel activity, whether booked through their TMC, direct with suppliers, through an OTA site, or any other method in one place in real time. If you'd like to learn more about how we accomplish this and explore the benefits of being able to receive complete itinerary intelligence in real time for your business travelers, we'll provide an opportunity for you to connect with us at the end of this webinar. This Office Hours webinar is a part of a series to help corporate travel managers down this path so they can turn their own travel programs into a strategic asset for their company. Bit of housekeeping before we begin. The webinar is being recorded, so you'll be able to view it again if you enjoyed it or would like to share with someone you feel may be interested. To view the recording of this and past webinars, please visit blog.traxo.com. Also, the Q&A feature is open, and this webinar is designed for audience participation through that platform. You have the ability to post your own questions or outbook questions you feel most relevant for the panelists, and I'll be sure to bring them up with the panelists either during or towards the end of the webinar. So without further ado, please allow me to introduce you to today's panelists. Karen Bond is the Corporate Travel Program Manager for HNTB Corporation, an engineering and architecture firm with over 80 locations and 5,000 employees across the country. Over the last 15 years with HNTB, Karen has strategically implemented corporate travel policies, supplier relationships, online booking tools, and other creative technologies that enhance the overall traveler experience. She earned her GBTA Corporate Travel Expert designation in 2005 and Corporate Meeting Professional designation in 2009, and was recently named part of the top 40 women in travel for 2019. Welcome, Karen.
Good morning, glad to be here, thank you.
And Suzanne Boyan joined ZS Associates in 2012 with 6 years experience in the hospitality industry. She earned a bachelor's degree in hospitality followed by a GTP travel certification. Her deep understanding of how airline and hotel suppliers operate within their respective provider spaces showcases the ideal background and combination of skill and knowledge for her role. In August of 2019, Suzanne was named Business Travel News Travel Manager of the Year. Her accomplishments were recognized again 3 months later as one of BTN's 25 most influential people in travel. A full-length article also chronicled the design and management of her program, describing it as state-of-the-art and an industry disruptor. Welcome, Suzanne.
Thank you, Justin.
And Sharon Verrill is the Corporate Travel Manager for Provisor Technologies, Inc., a multinational manufacturing company in the food processing industry with 12 office locations worldwide. She has over 30 years of experience in travel, including sales, marketing, and corporate travel management. Included in Sharon's roles are negotiating of travel supplier agreements, policy development, the development and management of Provisor's travel risk management program, as well as management of the company's travel expense reporting and auditing program worldwide. Welcome, Sharon.
Thank you.
And thank you to all the panelists for joining today. Before we begin, we'd like to hear from you and know if and how much your organization's travel has resumed. So we've got a poll here, and we'd like to know what percentage of your travel program has resumed today. So while you're answering that, I'll go ahead and dig in and start with the first question. So Suzanne, thank you for joining again and welcome back. On the webinar back in April, you had mentioned that your largest challenge to date was in getting consistent communication together. So your travelers were getting information from multiple sources. One thing you did mention, and you said, you quote, data isn't a big challenge. We'd love to hear more about how data is not as big of a challenge. And curious to know, is communication still your biggest challenge to date, or is it something different?
So yeah, data remains not a very big challenge for us, in large part thanks to Traxo. I feel more confident than ever that we have all of the data that we need to know where our travelers are and be able to provide support and assistance. Thankfully, communication is no longer our biggest issue as well. Right now, the communication is pretty consistent and clear, which is nice, which is essentially no travel is taking place until our clients want us next to them, and that's not quite yet. We anticipate that we'll actually be one of the last sectors to get back out on the road, just because our travel is so heavily contingent upon other sectors wanting us there. And that's, I don't think, going to happen for a few months, if I had to guess. So the biggest challenge to date right now is probably around tempering expectations. There are a lot of people who do want to get back out on the road, and just having to remind them that the safest and most socially responsible way is to just wait and be patient. And when we do open up travel, which it technically is open, that we'll do it thoughtfully.
Oh, to be able to look down that aisle and hear that familiar voice coming over the loudspeaker saying, "This is your captain speaking." I completely understand that angst to get back out on the road. Okay, so we populated the poll results. It looks like most of you have said that you're between 0 and 25%. So appreciate that. Sharon, how about you? What is your biggest challenge with your program today?
Okay, well, as an essential business, we have been traveling throughout the COVID crisis, and we have a 3-phased approach to return to travel. So we're currently in phase 2. So right now, our biggest issue is navigating the entry requirements, both for international travel for essential workers. And by international, even like Canada is one of our biggest challenges, right? Because the websites aren't that clear on who's exempted from, the quarantines and things like that. So sometimes we are exempted from the quarantine, other times we're not. Our Europeans are having difficulties as different countries start adding in different restrictions. So we've actually started working with an immigration attorney to help us kind of navigate through these waters. But at the same time, once they get to the border, a lot of times the border person will make their own decision. So that's our challenge.
Appreciate that perspective, Sharon. What about you, Karen? What's your biggest challenge today?
So currently, we are traveling some. I think I was part of that 0 to 25% group. And like Sharon, we never really stopped traveling just based on us being essential. But we really fell off by June. We were seeing 100% down. And so as of July 16th, we actually lifted our ban on travel because of the fact that we are domestic. So we are looking more, not so much at other areas, but we are looking within our own borders for some of those hot spots. So we're seeing travel slowly come back. We are leaving it to the travelers' decision. We're empowering them to make the best decisions based on their comfort level. And a lot of times, if they're wanting to travel, but our clients aren't in the office or they don't want travelers, then there's, we just aren't seeing it pick up quite as quick as we thought we would. But
Great.
you had asked, I apologize for the challenge. I think similar to Suzanne, it was how to communicate without over communicating. And to relieve that concern, I actually paired up with my corporate communications department internally and let them run with the communications. But I was able to get the information together for them so that it streamlined from one internal point. But obviously looking at CDC, following the guidelines from them first.
Thank you for that, Karen. So turning back to you, Suzanne, on our April webinar, you mentioned that this kind of came out of nowhere for most organizations. I mean, we did have H1N1, but nothing to the degree of a global pandemic like with regards to COVID. And you had said that you had anticipated that ZS would be making a pandemic plan surrounding COVID, as far as what you've learned, what to do in a future scenario should something like this come up, which I thought was a very interesting point, a very good idea. Have you started in on that process, and how's that going?
Yeah, we haven't. It's still on our roadmap to do, but I think it makes sense to wait till the pandemic is over, or at least until there's some sense of a vaccine or herd immunity, whichever comes first. And once that happens, I think we'll be able to look back and think slightly more thoughtfully. To me, it would be a little short-sighted to do it now, when we're still very much in the throes of this pandemic.
Makes complete sense. Sharon, Karen, have either of you discussed, the option of making a plan, putting a committee together, or, some sort of a pandemic outlook for the future?
So we don't have a plan in place. I agree with Suzanne. After it's over, I think it would be good to work through that. We did start a COVID-19 task force back in January. And it started out as a small group, just, travel, HR, safety, and sourcing. Now we have in March, starting with the whole executive team, including the CEO, daily calls. So as we've worked through this, I think we're learning a lot. So at the end of this pandemic, I think, as Susan said, that's the time to try to put in some kind of basic structure, so the next time won't take us so much by surprise.
Sure. And when we're talking about lessons learned and things like that, we're still learning. There is no rule book for what we're having to deal with today, and it's one of those that we're writing everything down. We're going to have to look at it. What I am interested in is kind of what the travelers are feeling. And it doesn't matter. I mean, it does matter at the end of the day that suppliers are doing what they can do to bring in reassure travelers, making them feel confident to travel again. We as travel managers can do our part to try and make them feel better. But at the end of the day, it's going to really be up to those travelers and how they feel. So I think right now we're looking more at, we are aware, the awareness campaign is there. Wash your hands and control, what I say, control your environment. So where my confidence comes in traveling, because I have already, is I can control what I can see and, hand wipe everything down. I can wear, plastic gloves if I need to. I think that's where our campaign is going, to leave it in the travelers' hands to know that they need to take care of themselves as well. And that's the best kind of proactiveness, I guess, we're doing as well.
Fantastic. Thank you. So, one of the things that we talked about back in April was, what needs to take place for travel to resume. And, Sharon, I like the way you brought up different phases, which I thought was interesting because we published an ebook about the phases of resume to travel, just so everybody knows. So let's start with you, Suzanne. just to revisit this. So you mentioned that, one of the first things you were going to do is look at China to see where they are with resume to travel, because that's kind of where the pandemic had started, and you base your travel plans or resuming based on that. But, in addition to that, so one part is, did you do that? Have you looked at that, and where have you come up with in regards to that observation? And then also, what levers are going to have to be pulled for you to allow your travelers to return?
Yeah, good question. We haven't looked at China because our Chinese office hasn't resumed travel too much yet, and I think they're still being extremely cautious without actually physically being there. So we're still waiting. We have had a little bit of travel in Europe that we're learning from, and people seem to be slightly more comfortable moving around in Europe. And even within North America, we have some folks who have been traveling to and from. We're definitely in the under 25% range. What levers are going to have to be pulled? I think, look, I think many sectors of travel are doing the exact right things. The airlines are communicating pretty clearly what they're doing to keep travelers safe when they're on board the airplane. I think hotels have done a pretty good job of saying what their expectations are of travelers when they arrive at the hotels and what they're doing to keep the hotel rooms clean. At the end of the day, for us, again, it's going to be having when our clients actually want us there, being a professional services firm. And once that happens, we will still leave it up to the traveler. If they're not comfortable, they're not going to travel, and we will support that. But if they are comfortable and they want to travel, then we support that as well. It's about us making sure that we understand where they stand in that spectrum, and then saying, okay, here are the resources we can provide to you as a travel team. If you do decide to travel, here's kind of some PPE that we've sourced that you can utilize, and we'll send it to you, or whatever that looks like. But I don't know if there's a specific lever other than a vaccine. I think once that happens, things will look much different. But until that happens, it's honestly up in the air, and we're just going to play it by ear.
I appreciate that feedback. We are seeing some questions start to come in the chat, and I will get to those. And also would like to encourage, again, the audience to use that Q&A feature to populate some questions, because we will get to those a little bit further along in the webinar. So Sharon, let's go back to, you had said that you were in kind of a phase 2. So can you talk about the other phases and what you anticipate needs to happen in order for you to advance through those phases?
Yes, sure. So what we did was we coordinated with HR. So our phases kind of are in sync with the phases for return to office. So in phase 1 for travel, well, for the office locations, it was only a group of essential personnel to run the operations. All of the office people were working from home. So during that phase, only our technical service employees were allowed to travel at the customer's request for broken down machines. So we tried to postpone any installations or normal warranty work, things like that. So the restrictions also, they were only allowed to travel within home country, and they weren't allowed to fly. So this was at each of our locations worldwide. So when we went to phase 2, we were looking at the government restrictions, kind of per state and country, travel risk management data, also the supplier readiness, such as Suzanne was mentioning. What type of safety precautions did they have in place? And then lastly, with officer approval. So we went to phase 2 on June 15th. Phase 2 is still travel within home country you can fly. Other employees besides technical service employees can travel, but only at customer request. The technical service employees need manager approval. Any other employees need business unit VP approval. if they need to, there's an urgent requirement to go out of home country. They have to get approval from business unit VP as well as VP of HR. So that's the phase that we're in now, and we'll probably stay in this phase until the CDC lists their non-essential travel warning.
Thank you for that, Sharon. So Karen, your program is mostly domestic, and curious to know if there's any type of a difference as far as the levers that need to be pulled for your organization. And if you could speak a little bit more to what you mentioned about, lifting, the ban, and how that came about, and, what you're keeping an eye on, and what needs to happen for yours to be able to ramp up.
Right. So I would say that my first lever that I'm going to pull is on a casino slot machine. And if I get all sevens, then, I'm doing pretty good. But that's, it's because of the fact that we are domestic. Yes, we are still looking at some of those hot spots. What's Florida doing? What's New York doing? What's California doing? What's the fact that we can't even get into Chicago because, in Kansas City, Missouri, we are, considered a hot spot right now. So we do have the ability to search to those areas and see what each state is doing. I have put together a 2020 traveler resource for all of our travelers that have specific links that help communicate out to the travelers so that they can go ahead and click on a link and they can see what all the each one of the airlines are doing, whether they're a partner of ours or not. And so we, again, want them to be comfortable on their own, because I can tell them it's, yes, you can travel, we lifted the ban, but until they feel that confidence themselves, then that's what's really going to make that decision. Being domestic has its own challenges, which is each state is different. We don't have one umbrella. And when we lifted the ban, we lifted it as a whole. And so if you could imagine, and I think everybody's reports probably look like this, as a roller coaster. You're going up that big hill. We were primed to have one of the best years, and January, February, and then March, it looked like the first dive of a roller coaster. And we're just now starting to see those bars move up a little bit. What we've seen more so is the car rental. People are willing to travel via a car than an airplane. And again, I think it's because they have the control. They feel that they can, they're in charge of their own area. And so I think that that's kind of where we're headed.
Thank you for that. So follow-up question to that. I'll start with you, Karen. What tools, resources, apps are you using to see what each state are up to?
So my TMC has it's Amex GBT. They actually have a travel vitals platform that they have allowed us to utilize their clients. So that's probably been our biggest bet. Then also the CDC has one that's based off of a map. So I use that one. Why am I having I'm having an issue remembering John Hopkins, right?
Yeah,
Maybe?
John Hopkins, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They have one that is a map that is for the entire country, for the entire world. And it really breaks down, and I've seen that one covered on the news. So there's different ones that even if your TMC doesn't have one, there's others that we utilize as well.
All right, I was just getting a message in the chat. Johns Hopkins.
Thank
is the
you.
correct pronunciation. So
First
all
day
right,
with my new tongue. Sorry, don't know what to do with it.
So what about you, Suzanne? What tools, apps, services are you using to keep abreast as to what's going on in the world?
Yeah, absolutely. We lean heavily on our TMC. So much like the others have said, we utilize Lux Travel Management. They've been wonderful and have had loads of open communication with us in terms of, what's going on in the world and where they see the trends, and, helping us in terms of, I saw something about unused tickets come through in the chats and questions, and just, we have bi-weekly calls with them to discuss kind of the state of ZS and the state of travel, which has been really nice. We also utilize the CDC website, John Hopkins. That map is equal parts fascinating and terrifying. And then we also host weekly calls. We're a global company, so we used to host weekly calls. Now they're monthly calls, which each region of ZS, and that's to really understand the ground level of what's happening, because I think it's so easy to probably fall back on like news organizations, but at the end of the day, no one's going to know better than someone who's really there, and they're probably not going to put a slant on it that whatever bias they might have, they'll have the ZS bias, which is exactly what we want. So those have been really fascinating to hear how the different regions of the world are, where they are, and how they're reacting to where they are.
Appreciate that. And so just want to let the audience know, I do see a ton of questions about communication. So I am going to get to that. But just to finish up this round, so Sharon, anything additional that you would like to add with regards to resources that you're using to find out what's going on?
So sure, we use WorldAware's website. That's our risk management partner. They've got international reports, and they've just recently added one on the U.S. states as well. And and BCD, our travel management partner, has a really cool app in their trip source where you can put in the country that you're coming from to the country you're going to, which is really helpful. And then we do also on our COVID task force, we have members from our different locations in Europe, and then we get reports overnight from Asia to report into the task force in the mornings.
That's great. So, shout out to all the TMCs that are on the call. Good job. It sounds like you're all doing a great job for our travel managers here. So looking at the chat and the Q&A, there's very little guesswork as to the hot topic, and it's surrounding communication. So I would love to hear from the three of you with regards to how you are communicating to your travelers. Are they signing declarations to say that they understand, the risks that they're taking, or what they need to undergo to be able to travel safely? How are you finding out where your travelers are in regards to whether they're ready to travel or want to travel? Survey, not survey, for the employees. So all encompassing around communication, and I'll just leave it to you guys to decide how you'd like to answer that. So let's start with Suzanne.
I was trying to write down all of the questions that you posed. So how are we handling? There were a few. So how are we handling communication? Right now, we're handling it on a one-off basis. Once we start to see demand tick up, that's when we'll start to communicate more widely in terms of what our expectations are of our travelers. I think one I thought was interesting was how are we finding out if they want to travel, kind of alluding to something else I said about our travelers having a choice, at least for the time being. And that's a self-declaration. If they want to travel, we assume that they will be the ones clicking the buttons to book their travel. If they don't want to travel, we also assume that we've hired adults who will have adult conversations with their project principals and project managers and say, look, I really don't feel comfortable. I have whatever reason not to travel, be it personal or professional. And the culture at ZS is such that we would absolutely support that 100%. And we have it written on our intranet that we do support that, just in case they need some sort of backup that they can point to. I think there was a third question. I'll be honest, I don't remember it. Was there, could you remind me?
It's just keeping them abreast as to what they need to do or what they need to know to get out on the road.
Sure.
Like if there are any new legal issues, and as far as declarations, do you have your employees sign a declaration?
No, we're not going to have our employees sign a declaration. I think the declaration is clicking the book travel button, that they probably understand the risk and that they are in fact agreeing to travel is their declaration for us. In terms of communication, what we expect from them, again, it's on a one-off basis. And so if people are traveling, we make it very clear what the airlines expect of them, what CS expects of them. And then again, when travel opens up, we'll go ahead and tell them on more of a mass level, a mass email, here are the resources to go to. We're not going to come on a one-off basis, but you always have a choice. And if your choice is I don't want to travel, please don't book the travel. If your choice is I want to travel, you have to understand the risks that are involved with that. Pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, pandemic, there is inherent risk with traveling regardless, right? The risk is obviously higher right now. And so I think it stands always that when you book the travel, you are inherently saying that you're okay with whatever risk is currently being posed to you. I'm not a lawyer though, so I lean on my legal team heavily to tell me
disclaimer,
what the best. Right? Yes, yeah. Please don't utilize me as your source of legal advice. I would highly encourage everyone else to run their thoughts and ideas past their own legal teams and ensure that they are in line with their corporate culture and their corporate legal entities.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. Let's jump to Sharon. With regards to communication, like Suzanne pointed out, there are a lot of different questions around this topic in the Q&A. So I'd love to hear from you as to what you're doing to communicate. How are you engaging with your travelers, gauging where they are? Do you have them sign a declaration or anything on their end? And let's go from there.
Okay, so no, we don't have them sign any kind of declaration. Again, we've partnered with HR in our communications. So we've sent out communications, at phase 1, again, when we entered phase 2, and we try to keep in touch with them with a formal communication emailed out to everybody about once a month, just with a reminder of which phase we're in, practical recommendations. We also have a place on our intranet where they can learn all the newest information on suppliers and what they're doing, as well as the country and state requirements. And then we've also, as a reminder, reintroduced them to our traveler hotline that they have available to them while they're traveling, because it goes on every itinerary, but as we all know, they don't always look at their itineraries. So, and each time they go out, we attach the recommendations that we've come up with the itinerary. As far as talking directly to the travelers, our team is kind of a nucleus in the company, so they're always contacting us about multiple issues. So anytime they contact us about anything, we ask them about how their travel's going, how do they feel about the places they're staying, do they feel like they're living up to the standards that are being advertised. And we also make it clear to our travelers that if you get in a rental car, you get to a hotel and you feel uncomfortable with the standards that they have, then leave. Give us a call, we'll put you somewhere else. We don't care. If you get on an airplane, you feel uncomfortable, you're boarding, don't get on. I mean, let's be smart. If there's something that doesn't feel right about it, you shouldn't be doing it, and we can get you reaccommodated. So that's kind of where we are with communication. So it's not, we haven't done any formal surveys or anything like that. If they've gone somewhere that we know that there were some issues like getting into Canada or Mexico or something, we'll check up, we'll call them afterwards and just see how it went and what they experienced.
That's great. That's great. So Karen, same question to you. A little added caveat. We had a direct question about your methods of communication as to what you feel has resonated the most or what's been most effective. So aside from that, what are you doing to communicate and to connect with your travelers? Do you have them sign a declaration? How are you structuring that information to gauge their interest and find out where they are?
Right. Well, so thank you for all the great questions that are coming in. Keep them coming. So we empower our employees to make the best decision for them. So I think that is their declaration. Similar to what Suzanne said, when they push that button to book travel, they are accepting that they are going to be traveling. But again, the decision is theirs. So to Sharon's point, if they're not comfortable, then we won't make them either. I will be putting out a survey to get a temperature check on travel. And that is said in, tongue in cheek, because we need a temperature, not just of ourselves, but of where are travelers and how are they feeling? It's funny. I always joke saying, I feel like a care counselor some days and a therapist, just because, angst of travelers and things like that. And so I think we have to have a lot of empathy with them. And so with that, the communications need to also say, we are with you. We want you to be, confident in what you're making your decision on. And so I communicate, I educate. I communicate, I educate. Communicate is that first reaching out via, if it's a directly to answer that one question, through my corporate communications department, and letting them do the branding to make it look and feel HNTB. And then also going directly to the travelers, myself, and saying, do you have everything you need? Do you have any questions? What can I answer for you? And giving them some extra resources and giving them that travel resource. Basically, it's a PowerPoint with links galore and saying, check this out. You might enjoy this. And so that's the communicate and then educate, is those personal conversations with travelers, getting a temperature check, and just repeating that without feeling like, having that the sound of empathy versus, stress. And you know what I mean? Where you're coming through as someone who cares about them because you do. We don't want anybody to get on a plane, get in a car, stay at a hotel, anything that would jeopardize the safety of our travelers. So I think that communicate and educate go hand in hand.
Plus, it's easy to remember. Communicate and educate.
Right. I think we could make a country song out of that.
A little bumper sticker, right? HNTB travel. Communicate
and educate 2020.
Right.
Well, I think it's funny that everybody, it's 2020, and the big saying is 2020. Hindsight is 2020. Well, aren't we getting a load of it?
Yeah, very true. So let's talk a little bit about supplier expectations versus reality. So in April, Suzanne, you had mentioned one of the levers to revisiting travel is going to be reassurance from supplier partners that truly effective sanitation is taking place in rental cars and hotel rooms. And one of the things you mentioned was that hotels were utilizing some of that space for kind of rollover for hotel rooms, or hospital rooms. Extra rooms which is a great idea, but one of the concerns was, how are you going to make sure that this environment is safe for my travelers when they get out on the road? So one question that's come up a lot that we've seen in forums and discussions, abroad as a result of the pandemic is, have you found that the suppliers overall are enforcing their laid out cleaning standards in actuality, that the end result has been hit or miss, or something different? Let's start with you, Suzanne.
Yeah, I'll be honest that I'm probably not going to be a great source of truth for hotels. But in terms of airlines, I just recently took a tour of O'Hare with United, and I was actually really impressed. The only area that seemed a little shifty was the TSA, and I say that, no, I happen to think the TSA has the most thankless job probably in the world. And they certainly get a lot of flack for having to attempt to keep us all safe. That being said, that was the one area that I just didn't feel had lived up to the standards of what we would anticipate them what we would want them to be. Like, there was no cleaning solution anywhere. The conveyor belt wasn't clean. There's no mask enforcement, and so on and so forth. But in terms of like the airport itself, the airlines, the terminal, I was really shocked at how well it was being maintained, and actually seeing it firsthand, I think did wonders for my confidence in putting our travelers back out on the road. So I would absolutely be open to seeing hotels or rental car facilities and being able to see it firsthand before my travelers see it, because I think that's what's going to undermine confidence, is where we say, yeah, travel is open and we trust that what everyone else is saying is true, that it's clean, but being able to see it firsthand and not having to hear maybe a bad story or two from our travelers, I think would help.
Great, thank you for that feedback. Sharon, what about you as far as the expectations of the suppliers versus the reality?
Well, so yes, I like what they've come out with and they say that they're doing. And I haven't been on the road myself yet. I will be later today for the first time. But what I'm hearing from my travelers is that they feel very comfortable flying. And I like the fact, you know, I'm kind of focused right now on the air filtration systems. So I feel that the airplanes with the HEPA filters, and my question to airline suppliers is it on all of your airplanes? Do you have any older planes that don't have that? But like I said, my travelers were actually extremely happy when we went into phase 2 and they were allowed to fly again. During phase 1, early in the pandemic, it was much more difficult on the road. They would stop at gas stations, the bathrooms would be closed. It was hard to find places to eat. So as things have opened up, that's been helpful. My concern is that the travelers may be getting too comfortable and maybe not adhering to all of the safety precautions that they should. But I've only had one rental car experience, and we sent the car back and they gave them a different one. But other than that, I've had pretty good input from the travelers about the hotels that they're staying at and the airlines.
Very good, very good. Karen, before we jump into that question for you, wanted to ask you offhand, had a question come up. So you had mentioned a PowerPoint with links. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but if you happen to have those links available, is that something you can share in the chat?
Wow, that's a really technical question. Is there a way that I could just share it with you, Justin, and you could attach it to whatever you're putting out with the recording? I'm happy to share it.
Okay.
You know, and yeah, I'm happy to do that. Like I said, putting me on the spot on actually how to work my computer.
Yeah, understandable. So, you know, for those in the audience that are curious to know, we'll go ahead and I'll get that from Karen, then we'll populate that into our blog post after the webinar. So again, the website is blog.traxo.com. So Karen, to you, as far as supplier expectations versus reality, what have you found?
So when I was doing the research to put all of the links together to all of the vendors' cleanliness concepts and the taglines and things, everyone is doing something, which is great. As for reality, it is happening, but my concern is how long will these standards actually be kept up? You know, similar to, unfortunately, I can't remember if it was Sharon or Suzanne that said it, but as our travelers get comfortable, will our suppliers get comfortable as well? So I guess I'm happy to see that these things are being done. I'm sorry that it took a pandemic to make it happen, but how long are we going to get to keep, you know, that security blanket before we become, you know, comfortable again? And so I think that that was my main concern about that. But again, it's happening, and I don't know about hotel rooms. I think there's a level of trust that has to go into the brand that you're staying at, the, you know, uh, just the trust that the traveler has. Again, I go back to controlling your environment, and you, being the traveler, are the one that is going to make yourself feel the safest. So we can be therapists, but at the end of the day, you know, I carry my hand sanitizer. I carry clean wipes, you know, the little hand wipe things with me, wet ones or whatever. And I just feel better when I can wipe down and I am in control of, I've just seen this cleaned. And so it's great if they're doing it, but the truth is going to be if you feel comfortable or if you feel like you need to do that extra step.
Yeah, and I think the concern, as I've heard this topic brought up, is that with regards especially to hotels, you know, you've got the corporation and then you've got the franchisees. And so they're wondering, you know, are the franchisees living up to the expectations that they're supposed to by the, you know, the corporate overseer?
Right. And how do you track that?
Right. Yeah. And that is an excellent question, you know, which I'm going to give a plug for our next webinar about the town hall. So if any of you have any ideas on that, we'd love to hear from you on our upcoming webinar. So I'd love to hear from the audience on this one. So we have another poll. You know, so how have suppliers been living up to your expectations? We'd love to hear what you have to say about that. So while they're answering that, I'm gonna ask another. Let's talk about the reaction to the pandemic. So when you know, back in February, March, April timeframe, there was a big push on compliance, mandating policy. You know, so speaking with regards to duty of care and being able to know where all of your travelers are going, where they're booking, you know, the thought was, you know, we're going to rein everybody in and we're going to just heavily mandate the program. So I'm curious to hear from each of you. Have you made any changes with regards to program compliance, you know, such as mandating? And if so, excuse me, and if so, do you think that that change will be sustainable? So let's start with you, Suzanne.
No, I don't. We are, I guess, the biggest change that we've made is that we've essentially said there was no travel, and so we basically shut down travel. And now we've opened it back up domestically only, because what our people said to us was they don't want to have to quarantine if they're going to be traveling on behalf of CS Business. And so at the end of the day, I think what that says is travel for us is going to look very similar to what it looked like before. I don't think, my personal opinion is that there will always be a reason for leakage, quote unquote. And those reasons, regardless if you think are good or bad, you can mandate in the short term, but in the long term, it's not going to work. So right now it's very easy for me to control the 7 people a month that are on the road, when I normally have, you know, 1,200 people on the road every week, managing different trips. It then becomes impossible to keep the mandates during the pandemic that would be post-pandemic. So no, it is the short answer to the question is I don't think it's sustainable, nor do I think it's wise for the future of travel.
Thank you for that. Sharon?
So yes, during the pandemic, we are mandating using the approved booking channels and preferred suppliers, and we've put pre-trip approvals in place. I feel like we're getting pretty good compliance out of the US. We're probably getting almost 100% during COVID. Europe and Asia, I don't think we're at 100%. I think we still have some leakage there, especially in France and Thailand. And after we kind of get through this pandemic and we get back to more normal travel, I would expect leakage to increase worldwide. So need to find a way to rein in all that, the people that are booking outside the system.
You know, I might be a little biased, but I happen to know of a way to be able to do that.
I thought you did. But no, I think that you can never get 100% compliance. So.
Great, thank you. So Karen, how about you? Have you done any changes to, I happen to know a little bit about your program, so I might know where you're going to answer this, but have you made any changes to your program with regards to compliance, mandating, and do you think that that would be sustainable?
So no, I don't think it would be sustainable. And since we are not a mandated program pre-COVID, it really, in our culture, it just doesn't make sense to try and mandate. So we have and we always will be a highly suggested, strongly recommended. So that will remain. But I just don't see where I see the value coming in. I need to capture that leakage this is the time that I'm doing things like updating our OBT to reflect, COVID related links, release other, enhancements that weren't there prior. And I'm hoping that will continue to kind of drive the traffic into our OBT to catch that. But as always, there's going to be that, I like the word you used, blind spots versus leakage, because there's, always blind spots in everything in business. And so I feel that that's where our next jump can be, especially since it's like somebody hit the reset button on everything. And so we almost have a fresh go at it. Great,
thank you. Thank you. So one question that's been coming up in the chat and the Q&A is surrounding the actual cases. So I'm gonna actually just open this up to the three of you. Feel free to chime in. So we'll see if you all answer at once. But so have you had any challenges with employees? Obviously, I don't want to know any personal details, but have you had any incidents? That's one question. Two, if you have not had any incidents, do you have a plan for what to do in case someone does test positive while they're out on the road or should, contract something?
So I'll take this one first, and just to say that yes, we have had some cases. I think the total had been 9. We unfortunately did lose somebody within the firm. It was taken heavily pretty much by everybody because it was just a true loss. But as soon as a positive case came onto the radar, and they weren't traveling at the time, it was homegrown, if you will. Offices were sprayed, sanitized over the weekend, so buildings were shut down in that area. Our little fobs that we used to get into the building were turned off just to make sure that they had 48 hours for sure to sanitize and things. So it's definitely something that as soon as it's prompt reaction.
So we've done similar things. So in all of our office and plant locations, we do electrostatic cleaning once a week. We do temperature checks on entering the building. We have to do another health health check around noon. So there have been a couple of travelers that have tested positive after they returned. So in that case, we do an extra electrostatic cleaning, close down the building for 24 hours. HR then does the contact tracing to see who they've been in contact, when was the last time they were in the plant, determine how long they need to quarantine. We've been lucky. All of the cases that we've had have been mild. We did have one traveler out in California whose wife tested positive while he was gone. So he had to immediately leave the customer, and he had a choice to quarantine in his hotel room or to drive back. So he chose to drive home, and he never did come down with the disease. But so we're heavy into the contact tracing and then the extra cleaning protocols.
That's great. Thank you. Okay, so we're nearing the end of the webinar here. I'd love to see the results from our last poll. All right, so it sounds like the majority of you had said that they're mostly living up to expectations. Some outliers, but overall they're doing a great job. So it's great feedback to hear. Appreciate that. One last poll for all of you in the audience. We would love to know what topics you would be interested in hearing about in our future webinars. So we've added some suggested topics in this poll, and we'd be grateful to know your thoughts. Also, there will be a survey at the end of this webinar, and we encourage you to share any suggested topics we've not listed that you feel would be valuable. And you do have a chance to win a $20 Amazon gift card. So while everyone is answering this one, we'd like to take the time again to say thank you for joining us today, and especially a special thank you to our panelists for volunteering their information and knowledge. There were great questions asked, and although we did not get to all of them, we will be sure to follow up with those questions that did not get answered. Also, keep an eye on your inbox for our next webinar, which will be a great opportunity for you to share your voice. Whether you have questions for your peers about challenges that you learned that you feel will be helpful to others, that you'd like to hear from peers, or best practices you've learned that might be helpful to others to share in your role, the Traxo Town Hall will be an open forum for you to do just that. And also, if you would like to learn more about how Traxo could help your organization eliminate corporate travel booking blind spots, and for a personal virtual tour of our services, you may request an overview at the link we are posting in the chat. And I'd like to thank you again, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you.